Welcome to the podcast of the impossible. I'm Peter Wood, and my guest today spent over 3 decades winding a giant clock in a tower. It's Jeff Eline.
That's funny.
I was just trying to think of something,
different.
And was there a ladder part of that? Ladder with D's. You took stairs, but then was there some point where you were like scaling a ladder once a week?
Not really. There was essentially stairs. With maintenance, yes, in order to get up into the cupola of the guy. So what he's referring to is if you know the scene in Back to the Future where the electricity, lightning hits the clock in town, the town clock.
Yep.
Our town, just outside of Baltimore, where my great-great-grandfather, back in the 1840s, set up shop and lived in the town that I grew up in. And in 1888, the elders of the town came together and decided to buy one of those big town clocks.
Right.
And it was erected on the building. There was kind of a town hall building right next to where my grandfather lived, and he was one of the ones that organized it. So he, as a result, ended up winding it. It's like a big a grandfather clock. There's weights.
Yeah. But it's like 7-foot diameter, right?
The face.
I mean, the face.
Yeah, the face of the clock is about 7.
And something. And the weights require a huge amount of vertical space.
Exactly.
It's a big old thing.
Yeah, it's in the very top of right now. They moved it in 1967.
Okay.
It's now on top of the Masonic Lodge in our town.
Yeah. Cool.
And it's a 3-story building, and then the cupola on top of that, and so the weights go from the attic space of this 3-story building to the basement.
Oh wow! So like over 4 stories of wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And you have to wind it every week, just like a grandfather clock, and you have to maintenance, oiling, and the odd broken part every now and then. But my great great grandfather started it, and then my great grandfather, and my grandfather, and my father,
right?
And then obviously it passed to me.
Yeah, sure.
And you like I said, you wind the clock, but essentially everything is the winding of the clock.
Yeah,
there is some maintenance once a year, usually in the springtime when it's not too hot in the attic or too cold.
Sure.
You'd go and you'd wind everything.
Okay.
There is a magical component to this. Do you want to hear this story?
Of course, yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So when my father passed away 12 years ago, we made the stupid decision to stop the clock on the time that he passed away, as in honor of him.
Oh, okay, sure.
And then after the funeral service, we would go up and restart it. And something went wrong.
Oh, no.
And it wouldn't run. A piece broke of some sort, or got bent or something. I really don't know exactly what happened. Yeah. But who do you call to fix a clock like that? I mean, it's not an entry in the yellow pages.
Sure. Yeah.
Which for you young people out there was a book that
someone printed out a small piece of the internet and would leave it
and
on
would
your
deliver
doorstep.
Yeah,
sure.
Thank you, Brian Regan, for that joke. And so, it broke, and I reached out to some people, and some people were like, I can't help you. And then, I finally, long story short, it took like 9 months for this to get fixed. Oof. And several people, and there was a guy that tried to scam me, and, there was this whole story. And it really was extraordinarily stressful. Right. I mean, losing your father, who was a partner in the business.
Sure.
There's all that kind of stress that's inherent and normal. Yeah. But then on top of this, like I'd have people in town going, "Oh, I guess since your father died, no one's taking care of it." I go, no, I've been winding the clock for 20 years.
Yeah.
My dad couldn't climb the steps in the last 15 years.
Sure.
And so I've been taking care of it. It's my fault that I stopped it. I shouldn't have stopped it, but
you didn't. There was no way of knowing that.
No. But it was. I could just see cosmically my father reaching through the ether and slapping me,
you idiot,
in the head, you dummy.
Sure. Yeah.
So anyway, long story short, it took about 9 months for this to get fixed.
Okay.
And I was in New York City seeing Steve Cohen's magic show, Chamber Magic, which is a great show if you're ever in New York. It's a really good show, and I'm with my wife and another couple. We're seeing the show. We're up front. We have the up front row
Sure.
seats.
Yep.
And with us is like two sets of grandparents with their grandchildren.
Okay.
And so we'd been talking to them, and they're nice and they're. And Steve Cohen gets into, in the middle of his show, a Q&A act. So if anyone doesn't know, it's kind of an old-timey spiritualist 1910 form of magic called Q&A, question and answer, where people would write down questions, and the performer, psychic, spiritualist, whatever, would understand what those questions are and give you an answer.
Right, without looking at
apparently
what you
without
had written,
looking at the supposedly without looking at what you've written.
Right.
And there's a couple different techniques in that, and one of them is basically making a guess.
Yeah.
So you're like just looking at this area, going, "Oh, someone with the letter M in their name is having problems," you know, and then all of a sudden someone raises their hand. Yeah, my name's Mary, and you know,
I'm having problems.
Right. So every now and then you've got the different techniques, and one of them is just kind of throwing these darts out and seeing if they hit anything.
Yeah, sure.
And he comes over to our section, and he goes, "Is there something with a clock?" And he starts to say hickory dickory, you know, and I can tell he's going for the grandparents because they've read a story or something to them.
Interesting.
And my wife, as soon as he said, I see something about a clock. Is anyone having it? And my wife goes and points right to me.
Sure.
And so he like laser focused on me. Oh, what's with the clock? And of course I said, well, we have this town clock and it got broke and my dad died, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So we go out to dinner afterwards and we're with this other couple.
Okay.
And we're talking about the show. And at some point the other couple goes, how in the hell did he know about the clock? And
right.
Gail told him.
Yeah.
She pointed to him, you know.
Yep. He went fishing and he caught a big fish.
Big old fish, man. He hit it hard.
Yeah.
And the irony of the story is I got a call from the guy who was fixing the clock while I was in New York.
Oh, wow.
I think the next day saying, I got it fixed. It's all done.
Cool. Good.
So I don't know if I should credit Steve Cohen with that.
Absolutely. But, he puts it on his business cards and website.
Yeah, he should.
He single-handedly fixed, the clock that
3 hours away.
Right. Yeah. And had been running for, 5 generations and over a century. And it's just another feather in his cap, you know?
So that's the clock story.
That's funny.
I just recently sold my business and I handed over the maintenance of the clock, unfortunately not to another generation.
Right.
You know, my son doesn't live in the area.
Yeah, I was thinking, man, that's a lot of pressure for your son.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Probably for the best.
6 generations. No, we ended at 5, and now there's a committee of guys that I handed it off to, and they're taking care of it. So anyway, that's
especially that way it's local. I mean, it makes sense to keep it more in a local town than in a family. Because if you guys want to move, it's important that local people are able to keep the clock running.
And there's this misunderstanding in the town that it was our clock. So it needed painting, and the Masonic who owned the building came to me and goes, "Oh, are you going to pay for the painting?"
What?
I don't have any,
Sure, never been argued. Yeah,
it'd get hit by lightning, and it would be like, "Oh, Jeff's clock went out." No, it's not my clock. It's a town clock.
It's the town. That's got to be.
So it's
well, one thing I did want to talk about, which is sort of the inside baseball kind of thing that I don't know if a non-magician would even think about. You and I love, discussing the minutia of what we, this
ad
thing we care
infinitum.
about. Yeah. No, and one of the topics that comes up among magicians is known as the too perfect theory, and I guess I'll start with my definition of it, but then you can chime in if you feel that it's different from yours. But basically, the idea that if a trick seems too perfect, or it's too impossible, it's too clean, that you want to dial it back a little bit to sort of give the audience some possible explanation to latch on to. Right. So an example would be if I'm on stage and there is a clear box that is on a stand with nothing around it, and I snap my fingers and instantly there is an elephant inside the box. I think some people would consider that to be a too perfect theory, whereas like I should cover that box with a cloth,
Right.
or I should have lighting underneath of it so you can't exactly tell what's going on under, like, and if something literally just pops into existence where it wasn't before,
Right.
then that feels too perfect. Or in many cases, something that I think where the too perfect theory gets used is similar to Occam's razor, where if I'm looking at an effect and I say, okay, I don't know how that was done other than maybe the magician's using twins. That's the only thing I can come up with. And guess what? The magician's using twins. Like
Right.
the action, because it was literally somebody is standing on that side of the stage and they walk off stage left and they immediately walk on stage right. It's too perfect. You just assume that it's got to be. And in that case, it may be the most obvious.
Yeah, and in those examples, it leads you to the actual...
Sure.
Because there's just no other options.
Yeah.
Another example of that is, you hold a card up, you're on stage, you hold one single card, you ask this person, what's the card? Oh, it's the Jack of Diamonds. You turn around, it's the Jack of Diamonds.
Yeah.
The first thing that anyone who's trying to figure this out is going to go, well, they're in on it together.
Right.
And it may be the case. I'm not saying it is.
Yeah.
But, it's those kinds of examples that because of... And I think it's a flaw in the construction of the trick. I don't think it's a flaw in the method.
Okay.
So I've gone back and forth on this. And like you say, this is one of those things that magicians just banter about all the time.
Totally. Yeah.
Me too, including. That's not a criticism. And I used to subscribe to it. So there was an article written in the 70s in Genie magazine by Ross Johnson.
Okay.
And he's the one who first kind of coined the phrase, the too perfect theory.
Okay, cool.
And it was an interesting article and he brought up some good points. But I think the discussion oftentimes misses what I think is the real problem.
Right.
And this actually comes, I have to give credit to Darwin Ortiz. Darwin Ortiz is the one who who thinks about a lot of these things. Anyone out there who doesn't know who Darwin is, he's a great gambling card magician. And he's written a number of books, and a number of his books that he's written are theory books.
Right.
That don't really have any tricks in them. They just kind of examine a certain theory. And they are some of the best books that magicians read or should read.
Yeah.
And I think in one of the books, I think it's Designing Miracles. Strong Magic is the other one, and then the second one that he wrote on theory is Designing Miracles. And I think it's in Designing Miracles where he talks about the too perfect effect. And we've talked about it personally, and he kind of changed my mind on it.
Okay.
Because I think the Johnson editorial that was published in Genie 40 years ago.
Sure.
Had some really good points, had some interesting points. But I think the discussion often misses the mark. And again, this kind of comes from Darwin. I got to give him credit on this because he changed my thinking on it. Is that it's a mistake in the construction of the trick, not a mistake in the method.
Yeah.
So let's say you're using twins.
Yeah.
Well, if you use twins in the way that you talked about, it's going to lead people probably to that solution. And that's supported in the essay by Johnson in the too perfect theory. But that's because you didn't construct the trick properly. So you've got to have something, okay, while you may not overtly say to the audience, I want to make sure you don't think I'm using twins. So here's what I'm going to do.
Right.
But you do say, let's just, we have something else we have to do before this. Maybe there's a card that's selected and that's written on the forearm.
Right.
Maybe it's a word.
Yep.
Whatever it is.
Or borrowing a personal object that supposedly is on that twin, but you get it to the other one.
Exactly.
Secretly. Yeah.
So you construct the trick to not overtly, but subconsciously eliminate those possible, if a magic trick is properly constructed and properly performed, it should leave people speechless. Like they don't have any idea.
Yeah.
Wow. And I think it's Eric Mead who talks about, he comes across and I'm sure you've had it, I've had it, where you'll have a spectator say, I don't want to try and figure out, I just want to enjoy it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's very nice. It's very kind on that person. So I'm not criticizing the person, but I actually want people to try and figure it out.
Yeah.
I want them engaged.
Yep.
Because the more you're engaged, the more you're thinking about how in the hell did that happen?
Yeah, yeah.
And if you come up with nothing, you have magic.
Right, right.
So the fact that something is too perfect, it's actually not too perfect. I think it's flawed.
Yeah.
Because you can anticipate those questions from, you can anticipate what the audience is going to think.
Yeah.
And take those out.
Right.
Along the way.
Johnny Thompson's phrase, closing the doors.
Yes.
Right. And the idea being that you want to go through all of the possible explanations that a logical spectator would assume.
Right.
And in each case, you want, it's almost like a sales technique where every objection that they might have, you want to have something built into your routine that closes those doors. Like, well, it's not that, it's not that, and it's not that. So it must be magic,
right.
You know?
And then it's perfect. It's not too perfect. It's, hopefully.
And I think, I mean, so I do see the too perfect theory used more than mostly, I believe, as a crutch or as an excuse for, well, the reason that I cover up blah, 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 even though I don't have to, is because I want to give the audience, it's almost, I guess you would almost akin to a red herring where I want them to think, well, maybe he took it away when he took away that cloth or whatever it might be. But that weakens it.
It absolutely weakens it. Then you're giving the audience something to ride out, and they can, I got this. Okay, now, all right, he didn't fool me.
Yeah.
I know it was the cloth. I don't know how he did it with the cloth, but it must have been the cloth.
Sure.
One of the only rules I have in magic, and this kind of plays into this too perfect theory, although I think there are examples where it doesn't. But the only rule that I have in magic is if what you're doing is part of the method, or if what you're doing, you're only doing because of the method, it's bad magic.
Right, right.
So if you're putting that cloth on because you want to try and fool someone, and it may not be part of the method, but it's part of the construction. Yeah. And you want to give them some sort of, there's no other reason to cover it other than to try and let them latch onto that reason. That's bad magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
so just construct what you got as best as you can to eliminate any possible explanation. Right. You're going to have a good trick, and there's no such thing. I don't think there's any such thing as the too perfect theory. I think it's just bad construction.
Yeah, I think that's and I can't imagine. I can't come up with an example of where the too perfect theory actually applies, like where, and like you say, normally it has more to do with, because even from a standpoint of your card trick example of somebody is going to immediately go to assuming that person is a stooge or a plant or working, for or with the magician, even that needs to be addressed somehow. And it shouldn't be addressed of, sir, we've never met before, have we? Because of course the actor would say we haven't, right? But even something as simple as like, people, lots of magicians, people may probably have seen David Copperfield do this on television, but throwing a thing into the audience and having that thing get bounced around several times, and whoever catches it on the third, land is going to be the one helping out. Right. That is I am not aware of any way to fake that. I am not familiar with any method where
that's a great challenge.
We should. Well, and Darren Brown even makes fun of it, where he says that he throws out a frisbee into the audience, and people have accused him of showing up at these like frisbee throwing championship things where, he's so
frisbee
good,
golf.
Right? He's so good at throwing a frisbee that he knows he's got his buddy in the audience right there, and So I think anytime, you can talk.
And why do you do that?
To make it clear that it's not an actor,
right? Because we anticipate. Yeah. If I just pick someone of my own free will, name this card. Yep. People are reasonably even if it's not true, reasonably going to go to the solution. They must be in cahoots.
Yep.
If I throw out, a Frisbee or a ball or whatever, and it gets tossed to 3 other people, that eliminates that immediately. When people go, how in the heck? No, it was he threw out the ball. I forgot about that.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's those kinds of things that I think you need to put in the construction of a trick in order to make it a perfect trick.
Sure.
And therefore avoiding the false premise of a too perfect.
Right. One, and I think another exercise that magicians will use is you start with, what if I actually had superpowers? What if I was a wizard? What would this actually look like? But the irony is and now we have to work backwards from there, not only to do our secret method sort of a thing, but again, if I really did have magic powers and I really was using it to have someone tell me what playing card I'm holding, that you still might go see this person who is a wizard who can literally do it, and you're already going to assume that it's a plant or a stooge. So you've got to put that, like you say, the construction in there to help to close those doors.
Yeah. Well, and it's the problem with Superman, and Superman could do anything. Well, then why do I have to watch him do this? And so if you have a superpower, if you're trying to mimic a superpower and you're going to use a stooge or something like that, it's just not, it's going to be undramatic.
Yeah, true. Yeah, there's no way that, that person who's working for you I don't care how good of an actor they are, they're never going to be able to emote or react the way an audience member genuinely would.
Right. The funny story that Penn and Teller tell
about the going up a set of stairs. Yeah.
Penn on his podcast talks about if you use a stooge, so someone who is part of your production and they're sitting in the audience pretending to be an audience member. You can, as an outsider, if you're watching it, you can always tell if it's a stooge, because when they get up and they walk towards the stage, when they get to the steps, they act as if the steps were this newfangled invention. And they walk it up very carefully. Yep. Whereas when you have a spectator, obviously lighting and steepness and all those things play into it. But if it's just a normal set of stairs, people just walk up it normally.
Yeah, because we encounter them on a daily basis.
They're not new. Yeah. So I always thought that was funny, and if I'm at a show, I always watch for how the people go up the steps.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think and also I think it's important for our friend listening to know that there is a variety. Like there are sometimes it's not necessarily an actor who is part of your company and goes with you from show to show. Sometimes it might be somebody who you snagged in the lobby beforehand, who bought a ticket and who you set up a little secret something with, But even then, you have to make sure that your construction is such that it doesn't seem like that is what you're doing.
Right.
And
I have a tiny story.
Yeah.
And this did kind of, I have to say, it did kind of ruin it for me. But I guess I was just paying attention too much. But I went this would have probably been the early 80s, and I went with a bunch of magicians because I was a kid, and they there was Harry Blackstone Jr. Was playing the Pier 6 Pavilion in Baltimore, and so we went down to see him. And so I'm sitting in the seat, and I'm just looking all around, this great big stage, and he's going to be doing all these miracles, and I just can't wait for it.
Yeah.
And someone from the staff comes up to the gentleman in front of me, sitting in front of me, whispers in his ear, and then the gentleman follows him backstage.
Okay.
And then about 10 minutes later, he comes back out, and he sits down, and everything's, copacetic. There's no difference. Yeah. Halfway through the show, Harry Blackstone Jr., great magician. It was a great show. It was a wonderful show. Pulled a whole bunch of people up on stage, and one of them was the guy in front of me.
Okay.
And he did all these things. I think he did a pickpocket routine. He was doing this and that. He was taking, wallet from here and car keys from here, and
sure,
4 or 5 guys up on stage. I can't remember. Took a belt off someone. And at a certain point, the finale of the routine, as he was just about ready to send everyone back to their seats, he goes behind the guy that was sitting in front of me. He goes behind him and pulls his dress shirt off of him through the like he's wearing a sports coat.
Yeah.
And he just grabs the collar of the shirt and pulls the whole shirt off.
Nice.
Like he could pickpocket a guy's shirt off his back.
Sure.
And then that was immediately when I went, oh.
Yeah, that's what they were doing for 10 minutes.
He wasn't an employee of the thing. He was just, like you say, some guy that they, convinced to come up and do this and be part of it. And so I did wish I didn't know that, because I think I'd still tell that story today as incredible.
Yeah. No, that's a pity. And again, not... and part of, taking it back around to the Too Perfect theory, the reason that I think that routine construction still makes sense is that we believe most likely everyone else on stage was a legitimate random choice.
Correct.
And the things that he was doing with those spectators, he could have done with almost any spectator.
Right.
But by mixing the methods of having, one stooge, one person who's agreed to be your secret assistant for this thing, that helps to undermine
in with
that.
many other methods. Yeah.
Yep. No, that's awesome. I would have loved to get a chance to see him live at some point. That sounds
the other trick from the thing, which makes absolutely no sense. I never understood this trick, but I have to say it was beautiful, and I loved it when I saw it, is he would float a light bulb, take a light bulb from a working lamp and float it, which is okay. That's cool. And then he went back, unscrewed it, and poured milk out of the light bulb.
Okay. So, I guess it's more impressive if it's not only heavier, but also somehow there is light coming out.
I just think the incongruency of all of a sudden a light bulb has milk in it. It's just,
I don't get that.
I don't get it, but I do have to admit I enjoyed it when I saw it.
All right, that's important. Well, I would love to actually, we will chat more, but we're gonna wrap up this episode of Podcast the Impossible. But I'm hanging out here today with Jeff Eline, and for more of my public shows, social media, and special projects, you can head on over to oftheimpossible.com. I'm Peter Wood. Thanks.